Hey, what's going on? I'm Quis here with another video. And in this video, we're going to be looking at 3 potential targets the Knicks could pursue to address the small forward position. Now, those 3 players are going to be Norman Powell, Kelly Oubre Jr., and Doug McDermott. I'm going to be looking at their stats, and I'm also going to be providing some comparable salaries. That way you guys can know what it may cost for the Knicks to bring these players in. Now, if you like this video, I would just ask you to consider, hitting that like button. Also, make sure you're subscribed. And if you are already subscribed, make sure that bell button is lit up. That allows you to get notifications whenever I drop new videos here on Sports Vibes TV. So with that being said, let's get into the first player. Now, the first player we're going to be looking at is Norman Powell. If you look at what he was able to do with the Raptors, he had pretty good increases from 1920 to 2021, at least for the first half, because as we know, he got traded midway through the season. So you can see from his percentages, field goal percentage shot 50% with the Raptors, and his 3-point percentage even increased at the beginning of this season from 40% to 44%. And the reason I like Norman Powell is the fact that he can play both the 2 and the 3. And he's also a great defender. And when you read a lot of articles about him, it shows that he's a high character guy. And when you're bringing in a player to this team, I think you want to make sure that they are high character players, high character people, because one thing that helped propel this team this season was our team chemistry. So if we're going to bring in pieces, I don't want to mess up the chemistry that we've built, that Tom Thibodeau has kind of instilled his first season with the team. So I definitely want to focus on some high character guys. Now, of course, Norman Powell, there are a lot of positives, but there are some concerns, at least some concerns that people have raised. And it's the fact that once he got traded to the Raptors, you saw a dip. Once he got traded to the Blazers, I apologize. You saw a dip in his field goal percentages. Field goal percentage dropped to 44% and 3-point percentage dropped to 36%. Now, some people could say, hey, does this mean he was only a product of Nick Nurse's system over in Toronto? Well, I would counter and say, if you look at the playoffs, once he got acclimated with that team, his percentages, they got back to normal. He shot 50% again in the playoffs, and he shot 39% from 3 in the playoffs. So I would attribute that dip in production to more so him having to get acclimated to a new team, and the fact that the Blazers, they were still dealing with CJ McCollum's injury. He was coming back. So there were a lot of players, a lot of things that were being introduced to the team or being reintroduced to the team. And they just had to gel and find ways to play together. So that would be my reasoning behind the dip in production. I don't think we should be concerned about this. I think the fact that Norman Powell, you can see for the most part, he's got his 3-point percentage at or above 40% for most of his career. I think that would be great for this team. When you're looking at 3-and-D wings for this team to bring in, I think the most important part of their game should be whether or not they can knock down the 3 consistently, because I think that's going to be the most important key in their arsenal when it comes to being that 3-and-D for us. We need them to pull the defense out the paint, which will allow Julius Randle, RJ, and even Luka, when Luka's finally on the court, to penetrate, get into the paint. And if anything, then if the defense decides to collapse and stop paint penetration, at least that person can find Norman Powell wide open for a corner 3 that he can knock down effectively. Also with Norman Powell, he can also break down the defense and get his own shot. He's versatile in that regards. He's not someone that's only a catch and shoot threat. He can literally put the ball on the floor, and he can finish at or around the rim. So I think that's why Norman Powell is probably number 1 on my list when it comes to players the Knicks should target for that 3-and-D. And if you want to look at some comparable salaries, you could just look at Danilo Gallinari, 3 years, $61.5 million deal that he signed with the Hawks. Same thing with Jeremy Grant. 3 years, he signed a $60 million deal with the Pistons. Both of those salaries have average annual values over $20 million, which is roughly what Norman Powell will command out there on the open market. If you look at the trade, the Trailblazers traded Gary Trent Jr. to the Raptors, so they gave up an asset. They're definitely going to work their hardest to try to get a deal done with Powell. So expect the price would be high for Norman, just because there's going to be a lot of competition with the Trailblazers. They don't want to have given up Trent for no reason. And also another thing with Powell, some people would argue he's a little undersized coming in at 6'3", but he plays a lot bigger than his size, and he's already shown that he can defend some of the more premier threes in this league. So I think that should not be an issue. Now, the next player I want to look at and talk about is Kelly Oubre Jr. Now, Kelly Oubre Jr., there's been a lot of talks of him potentially coming to the Knicks. I'm not the biggest fan of Kelly Oubre. Like I said with Norman Powell, one of the biggest tools or facets of this game that we're going to need 3&D to provide is the ability to consistently knock down 3-point shots. And when you look at Kelly Oubre, he was playing with the Warriors, and his 3-point percentage actually went down from his time with the Suns. And to me, that's kind of crazy, because just playing on the Golden State Warriors, and you have Steph Curry on that team, who at times was drawing triple teams, and you weren't able to knock down some of those open looks, that gives me a little cause for pause when it comes to Kelly Oubre and his ability to knock down the three consistently. Things that I like. He's able to get to the basket. He's extremely athletic. He has highlight dunks, and I think that's why a lot of people kind of gravitate to his game, because he has that flair, he has that excitement level, and I think it would be dope to see that in the Garden. But when you look at how this team is constructed and what we need to be most effective, we need somebody that can knock down the three first and foremost. At least that's my opinion. We need somebody that can knock down the three. After that, if you can get into the paint and finish with authority, I think that's icing on the cake. That's a nice piece, or that's a nice addition to your game. But we need somebody that's a bona fide knockdown 3-point shooter. And my issue is Kelly Oubre is not that at this moment. So if you're going to give him what's reported as over $20 million a season, I'm going to need more than just a hope that he's going to develop that portion of his game. I just haven't seen it. Even with the Suns, he was shooting 34%, which is okay. But, Reggie Bullock was shooting close to 40% some of these hot stretches. And you saw how good this team was when we had a small forward out there that was knocking his 3 points down at that 40% clip. That's something Norman Powell can provide for us. And, I'm not sure if that's something Kelly Oubre can do for us. He's never done it before in his career. And, people don't just naturally become better shooters. They have to put in the work. So the fact that he was out there with Steph and Clay, and we didn't see an increase in his level of production when it comes to that 3-point percentage, I think that's a little bit troublesome for me. Kelly Oubre, like I said, has other assets of his game that I like. He's great at getting into the paint and finishing around the rim. But on this team, we need someone to, like I said, pull the defense out and create more driving lanes in the paint and a lot more space for Julius Randle and RJ Barrett to operate. So me personally, I don't think he'll get $20 million a season, even though I'm just a Knicks fan, so what does that mean? But if you look at a comparable contract that I think I would value him, I would look at Bogdanovich, who signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Hawks, and also Joe Harris, who signed a 4-year, $75 million deal with the Nets. So both of those deals come just under $20 million per season, because he did play for, I think, $14.4 million this season. So he's definitely not going to take a pay cut, I don't think. But I don't know if he's going to eclipse the $20 million mark. And if he does, I personally hope it's not us, that gives it to him. If he comes in maybe a little cheaper, then all right, we can talk about it. But that his ability to knock down the three kind of, pushes me away when it comes to potentially signing him. Now, the third player that we're going to be discussing is my man, Dougie McBuckets. So Doug Mcdermott, he is a former Knick. He was with the Knicks, but if you look at his performance, his level of play since leaving the Knicks and going to the Pacers, you can see that his numbers are up across the board. Points per game are up by 3 points. You've got his field goal percentage that's up by 4 percentage points. You've got his 3-point percentage points up by 2 percentage points. And I think what's real key to me is if you look at his 2-point percentage from his time with the Knicks and compare it to his time with the Pacers, you're gonna see that there was a 9 percentage point increase finishing or shooting 2-point shots. And I think what's key about that is the fact that that shows that Doug McDermott is no longer a one-trick pony. During his time with us, for the most part, Doug McDermott was a threat to catch and shoot. But now with the Pacers, you're seeing him get a lot more buckets at and around the hoop, and he's finishing with a higher efficiency. And a lot of those buckets were off nice cuts with the Pacers. He's still not going to do too much taking anybody off the dribble. I mean, he can when the defense is trying to rotate and they over commit, and he's able to get by him. But for the most part, he's making those 2-point percentage shots at the rim off cuts. He had a lot of nice backdoor cuts with the Pacers, and Sabonis found him a lot of those times. So if that's something we can do with Julius Randle, where they have that kind of synergy, then I think Doug McDermott would be a nice addition to the team. Also, Doug McDermott is not going to cost as much. I mean, if you look at a cost, if you want a cost-effective option at the 3, I think Doug McDermott is that option, is that guy. And you can also then splurge on the point guard position. You can go out there, spend big on the point guard position. You can also spend, a decent amount of money on a backup for Doug McDermott. That way, you see any dip in his play, you always have a backup put into that situation. Because I won't say Doug McDermott is a needle mover. He's just someone that's very dangerous with his ability to knock down the 3. As you can see, 41%. Another player that I said at or around at 40% 3-point percentage, which is what the Knicks should be looking for. We should be looking for a bona fide shooter. Doug McDermott provides that. And he also plays pretty decent defense. He's not a lockdown defender. I wouldn't go ahead and say that, but he's not going to be a major liability out there on the court. So if you want to look at comparable players and try to gauge what Doug McDermott could sign for, you're looking at Jay Crowder. He signed a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Suns. And you can also look at Dario Saric, who signed a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Suns. Now, if you notice, a lot of these deals I'm looking at are from playoff contenders. I mean, the only outlier I think is Jeremy Grant. He signed 3 years, 60, and I used that in my Powell comparison. And that, even though he played for the Pistons and he got signed with the Pistons, that's probably the best move the Pistons has made in years. So when I'm looking at these comparable prices and these comparable contracts, I'm trying to look at teams that, are playoff contenders and have made smart signings. And I'm just trying to look at the way we can move this offseason and try to do something similar. So you guys, let me know, do you like some of these options I provided for the Knicks? I mean, personally, if I were to give my opinion, I think Norman Powell would be plan A. You can bring in Norman Powell and you can still sign Alonzo Ball. I think we'll have enough cap space to do that. And that way you're taking care of the 2 biggest holes in our starting lineup, point guard, small forward. Now, if we're unable to bring back Norman Powell, because there's going to be a lot of competition with the Portland Trailblazers to sign him, we can then pivot. Me personally, I'd pivot to Dougie McBuckets, and then with that money saved, I can go and guarantee I can get the point guard that I want. Me personally, like you've heard, I want Lonzo Ball. But if there's another free agent point guard that you think the Knicks would have to spend big to acquire, then in this situation, you would then have the funds. And then third would be Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre would definitely be my third option to bring in. I mean, yes, he's young. I believe he turned 25 in December, but he just doesn't provide the amount of shooting that I think this team is going to need in order to propel itself and get further on in the playoffs. I mean, we saw how the Knicks looked in the playoffs when our 3-point shooting disappeared. And that's because we didn't have necessarily, the most consistent shooters. Reggie Bullock can knock down a 3, but I wouldn't call him a consistent 3-point shooter. And we kind of paid for that in the starting lineup by not having enough firepower. So if we can bring somebody that's regularly knocking down the 3-point shot at 40% or better, I think that would be the best way for us to go. You let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Once again, I'm Quis, host of Sports Vibes TV, and I'm out.